Hey everybody, and welcome to this advanced Photoshop edition of Design Cinema. This is Feng Zhu speaking, and if you are interested in more tutorials like these, you could go to YouTube and just search for FZD School, and there'll be plenty of episodes just like this one. And of course, they are all absolutely free. So let's get started with this demo. For this demonstration, for this tutorial, we are going to do something that's similar to the process we use in the film industry, which is starting with a photo plate. In general, directors like stuff that look photoreal because that matches the final result of the film. So here I started with a picture of Hong Kong that I took a few years back, and the first thing we got to do is reverse engineer the camera, and that is to find the perspective. And perspective is one of those words that are kind of, I guess, scary to some people who haven't understood it fully, because to a lot of people, I think perspective means a bunch of cubes on a piece of white paper, because that's what most schools make you do when you learn perspective. But in reality, that's not really what it is. Perspective, all it is a linear way or a mathematical way for us to find out how the human eye or a camera sees the world. That is all. And everything exists in 3D space, right? Animal, creature, architecture, anything. So if you understand how perspective works, you could then reverse engineer and put those objects into any kind of 3D space you want without making major mistakes. And the more correct you are at doing that, the more likely someone's going to like your drawing or painting because it looks correct. It looks natural to what they'll see. So in this case, I'm spending quite a bit of time reverse engineering that process. For architecture, it's a little bit easier to get that information. So by putting these lines, I could tell that this was taken with a slightly fisheye lens camera, because of the left and right side of the lens, you can see some distortion. And in this case, you can actually see the roundness distortion, which I'm going to ignore for this painting. I'm going to assume it's straight. Otherwise, it becomes quite difficult to paint. These buildings, because we know buildings are straight, we know buildings are vertically straight as well. So every angle on them is perfect. So we can use them as our perspective guideline. And also, by using the buildings, we could find the center of the lens, which is really important. You want to know where the center of the lens is. So when we start inserting other objects, we insert it correctly. The other thing we want to make sure that we get correct is foreshortening, right? Which is as an object goes away from you, they get bigger and smaller, right? And depending on the lens, they either are really, really big or really, really small. It depends, again, on the kind of angle or the lenses that you use. In this case, we have quite a bit of foreshortening that will take place, especially towards the left corner of this lens. So we put the grid, we spent, this video has been fast forwarded I say about maybe 2 or 3 times faster than normal, but this entire demo started at 7 o'clock and we're done with it by about 9:10, so about 2 hours demo that we compressed down to about 30 minutes or so for you guys. I put that grid on another layer, and I'm always going to keep that grid layer there. You can actually see it's called grid, so that way when we start inserting other objects, we could always reference to it. So here are a bunch of pictures of clouds I've taken. By the way, all the photos that you guys are going to see in this tutorial are taken by me. When you're going to do something like this, where you're using a lot of photorealistic elements that are very evident in your painting, you probably, very good idea to use your own stuff. You don't want to use photos that you find on the internet or scan from something, because photographs, just like drawings, belongs to somebody else. They have copyrights to them. So in this case, all the photos, the clouds, the buildings are all taken by myself. Here I'm just preparing the plate. You can see the layer is called plate. I set this layer up because we haven't painted anything. All this stuff is preparing sort of like just a background, the scene or a set, just like a Hollywood movie. Here's the set where the event or the story is going to take place. And we're going to prepare the lighting, prepare the mood, prepare all the ingredients, I guess, that are required. Here are some pictures of airplanes I took in China, actually. These are from an airfield over there. And I could use that texture. This picture has some great material on it. And Photoshop allows you to do this really crazy, interesting mix of things, right? Where we take a photo of a plane, and then by putting it on the side of a building, we then now destroy the set. Give it a kind of that post-apocalyptic feel, right? Time saving. This process, again, is very common in Hollywood, because for us, it's all about doing things that has high quality, but you also have to do it extremely fast. You cannot spend, we could always paint these, I guess, explosions and these cracks and stuff by hand, but except it would probably take 10 times longer, and that's not efficient in a production pipeline. If you're doing this for a painting or a piece of artwork, sure, you could try to do that. But when you're under very tight deadlines, it's all about the process. Any shortcut you could take to get to the result, right? Without obviously copying or tracing somebody else's work, right? All this stuff is actually still yours. It's your photos, it's your painting, it's your composition, right? So nothing to do with that. So you can see here going through more photos, just looking for scrap to put in textures, enough material for us to design the background plate. And of course, the perspective grid is heavily used because when we insert these objects, we got to make sure they're inserted in the correct camera lens. So in here, we have quite a bit of camera flare on the left corner. So this guy is you can see how extreme the vertical line is. It's almost at about a 25-degree angle here, right? And that's due to the lens that was used to take the original photograph. So by putting the grid and turning that on, we could see exactly where to place these objects and place them correctly, versus using just an eyeball to do it. In this shot, the horizon line is actually off of frame, it's below us, which sometimes makes the shot a little bit difficult to do, but in a way it gives you these shots that look very epic in scale because you're looking so up at the sky, because the horizon line is actually below the camera in this case. So we get this kind of, everything looks much bigger than life when we're looking up. So we're still adjusting the background plate at this point. Right? Haven't done any painting at all. Right now we've just been doing copy and pasting and adjusting colors and contrast. Right, this is the first time I actually painted, which is extracting that little walkway that's in front of the camera out from the background by adding some volumetric fog. Here's some more pictures. Here's pictures of, I think this is Shibuya in Japan that I also took last year. And just inserting some signs. These things I'm inserting here are for human scale. Because for us, for humans, you kind of know where certain things, how big they are, right? When you see a sign or you see another human being, you associate that very easily with the real world. So we're doing a painting that in a world that does not exist, which in this case, right, doesn't exist. You want to make sure that you could somehow still relate to it. And things that are human scaled helps the audience understand where they are. You know, where am I standing? How big is this scene? What is this thing made out of? All those kind of information is very critical when telling a story. So here I'm extracting a few more shapes. All these things are just grip, kind of like canvas, gripping the paint. So when I start to paint, I have enough information to extract from versus a completely blank canvas. This kind of approach, you're going to do this kind of photo real or kind of semi-photo real painting, then you rely heavily on photographs. As you can see here, a lot of the prepping is done with photos. Right? Whereas if you guys go to YouTube and look at some other episodes, like episode maybe 22, 23, 24 or something, those are 100% painted. We don't use any photographs at all. So Photoshop is one of those really cool tools that allows you to just create. It doesn't matter what process you use. As long as you can get a good result, it doesn't really matter how you get there. All right. Here I extracted some greenery, so this world's kind of destroyed, and you gotta make this stuff sort of make sense as well, right? So if something's gonna grow back, you'll probably start from the grass level and go upwards. So the green will have this kind of gradation from bottom to up. I still haven't painted anything. You can see it's still under a layer called plate. Just prepping the set. Imagine you're building this set. The set designers are out there just construction, and then once all that's done, then you take in the actors and the live action plates and the CG elements, all those kind of things. So here I think I'm gonna start painting. We did something called paint, and I'm gonna insert my first monster. This is the UFO guy that's coming down to attack the human colony with a little base. We turn on our perspective grid to make sure the foreshortening is correct, especially on his details and as well his legs. Yeah, quite a bit of complex perspective because the walkway and the buildings in the back are not in the same grid system. So in this case, the city, in most times, cities are built on grids, right? They don't build streets that are bending randomly in all the buildings. They try to keep everything on the grid. So using the city as a plate is very easy to reverse engineer the perspective. In this case, it's very easy to engineer, except we have about two perspectives going on, at least three. The kind of walkway right below this guy, the walkway that's running parallel to the shot, and then the buildings in the background. They're all on different grid systems. So for this guy, I'm choosing to use the grid that's actually, I believe, part of the buildings. So he's aligned to the buildings. But we're looking very, very much up at him, right? So at this point, I decided, should I run a leg into the camera? But I thought it would be a little bit distracting, so I kept his leg back. But you notice as a leg, when we experimented, the leg got really, really big towards camera, and that's all foreshortening. And that information was all obtained from doing the initial perspective grid. So here I'm painting. I'm starting to get the balanced lighting to him. I scale him around to make sure that we get the proper angle that we want to tell the story. Right? He's a major selling point in this shot, right? For any kind of shot, especially these movie plays that you devote so much time to, this is going to cost quite a bit of money for the film production to do this shot, right? You're looking at easily maybe $1 million or something like that for this single shot here, if it was to be done, say, from Weta and these kind of CG studios. So you want to make sure that whatever painting you're doing sells the idea very, very well, so the producers and the directors understand that this shot is cool enough to commit that kind of investment. Right, so we gotta make sure this guy's rendered well, drawn well, tells a cool story. Earlier you saw me paint out the antenna from the building behind him. It's because that little antenna was messing with the composition of this little UFO monster. So you just simply change the background. Right? A painting is all in your controls, just like a film. You're not watching something that's real. You're watching an optical illusion happen. The directors, or the storytellers, or the painter, or designer, they could control everything the audience sees. So in a painting like this, if something doesn't work for you, you could change it. Right? Nothing is raw. When you watch a film and the stuff in the background, the sets and stuff, oftentimes they're completely fake. Right? They're manipulated to help with the story. So anything that kind of gets in his way, for example, the antenna got in the way of this design, just get rid of it. Yes, of course, it's part of the original building, but you can always get rid of it. Who cares, right? The point, this is not to show off some building in the background. The point is to show the story. So you kind of have to let a lot of those kind of things not control your painting. You have to control it yourself. So you're just kind of continuing doing some details on this guy, getting all his legs out. It's got kind of like 8 legs or something of that kind. And here's his main cannon coming out of his mouth with this kind of laser. I kind of wanted to create that kind of 50s vibe to this painting. Those kind of very laser beam, retro design, things that you see in the 50s. These kind of really cool robots that are very huge and they shoot, kind of these energy beams out. So that's his mouth area. I'm going to put an eye in there. And it's going to be taking out some humans on the right side corner. So compositionally, we're balancing this with a triangular composition. So if we draw a line, you have a major shape on the bottom left, which is that dark bridge area that runs up into this guy that we're working on now. And later we'll see the human colony on the far right corner. And if you connect the dots, that makes a triangle. And that makes the read quite easy. So continue detail help. So if I'm going to spend time painting, this is actually the only thing we started painting on. Everything else we haven't painted on yet, right? The buildings, everything, they're just kind of photocopied together with various photo elements, but we haven't touched them up. It's because if we are going to spend time on the parts that count first. So in production, just in case, for example, working on this right now, and you get a call from the director saying, hey, this thing has to go to production now. We have to move on to something else. So send this over to the special effects houses. So even if you send this right now, at least something there is working, right? The overall mood is there, and you have this robot sort of almost designed out. So the production houses could use this information. They could kind of flesh out the rest. You could just tell them, hey, the building's really destroyed, and all that kind of stuff. They could figure it out, right? But the main selling point, imagine this robot wasn't there, where you haven't actually spent time on it yet, and you've been drawing grass or rocks in the corner. That doesn't help anybody because there's no subject matter, right? So spend the time wisely. That's just a little advice when you're working under production and production deadlines, right? Because those situations come up all the time. You think you have all the time in the world. Maybe you have, they told you have 4 days to work on this painting, and it ends up being 4 hours, right? So that's why this painting only took two hours to do. I try to keep everything very, very fast. Okay, so adjusting some value, getting him to kind of merge in correctly with the painting, messing with his yellow tint, but I actually removed the yellow and put in little bit of gray-green, but very slight. And now we increase the size of the canvas. We start at 2800 wide, and now we're at 56, so just double that. And the resolution, the way I like to work, is dependent on the resolution of the screen. In this case, I was doing this demo on a pretty low-res computer. It's only 1440 by 900. So 1440 by 900, if I double that, it's 2800, pretty much, right? Pretty close. So this way, my painting is at 50% view, but I can zoom in twice to become 100. Photoshop has one of those kind of errors where if you don't zoom in at 50 or 25 or 75 or 100, all the other in between, like 33, 66, they're kind of pixelated. The image is not clear, right? So whenever I increase my size, I make sure that it always sits at a 25 or 50 or 75 when I'm zoomed in or zoomed out in this case. Right? So right now we're actually at 25% zoom out. So we could zoom in, we could click zoom 3 times and get to 100%. Allow us to work on very fine details. Now I'm actually painting the other stuff. See, the main subject is there, right? It's kind of, we have enough information for the crab UFO guy to exist. So now we could take a break from, drawing that guy is stressful, right? You gotta concentrate, you can't screw it up too bad. So after that, you take a mental break from that and do some very simple stuff. Because painting rocks, trees, these kind of things are actually relatively easy to do. They don't take too much concentration. Right? You don't have to worry about perspective as much. Not very hard to mess it up, I guess. So here I'm just kind of taking a break from that UFO guy and painting roots, kind of these kind of set design things that's going to help tell the story and give the audience a cue of what time period or what kind of condition the background, the environment is currently in. Because the next part we're going to paint the human colony, so that's going to take some concentration as well. So take these mental breaks, right? So instead of keep working on hard stuff, do hard stuff, simple stuff, hard stuff, simple stuff. Keep the painting nice and interesting to do. So here I'm turning that walkway that we saw earlier from the original photo plate into this kind of like a little fort area where the humans are holding up, and these UFO guys are coming in to take it down, basically. Right? And which is a quite a typical scene you see in movies, right? The battle scene, the confrontation, I guess is what it's called. Bad guy versus good guy. This is some foreground element just for compositional purposes. So we build up some layers of foreground, midground, and background. Continuing painting details, and I think pretty soon I'm going to do the colony. So here we go. I'm going to look for some other photo refs. In this case, I want something that could help me start the fort. And this bus, again, this one, Hong Kong, works quite well. However, the perspective of it doesn't work. In the bus, the horizon is going right through the middle of the bus. So we're going to have to manipulate the bus a little bit to hide that perspective matchup, right? They don't match. You can see here. So what we're going to do is we're going to delete the bottom of the bus, which you'll see. Right now, I'm actually comparing scale. I'm trying to scale the bus so it's correct. So I use that walkway and use the people that are sitting in the bus to estimate how big this bus will be when I place it on top of the walkway. Right? So it's not too big, too small. Again, using perspective to help us with that. And now I deleted the bottom, and we're going to manipulate the color to sort of match in with the kind of greenish yellow tone. So the perspective is not perfect in this case, but we're going to hide it. We're going to put some other elements under to hide it. I'll also remove some of the text and font because those could be distracting in a scene like this where there's an action taking place. I don't want a big letter like a big word or something like that because people tend to read those kind of things. So you want to take that away from us. Whereas you can see I left the UC logo on the left side, the coffee brand, right? Because I could go there and then that creates a nice triangle from the UC to the UFO to the red or orange bus, right? So the orange also helps with that view thing because red colors tend to be quite strong in the painting and the eyeball will go there. So, but hopefully the first thing you see is the UFO guy. That's what we're trying to achieve with this painting. Here I'm continuing borrowing various photo elements. Again, all photos taken by me. This is a train from Tokyo. And I'm just going to borrow the roof for this painting here. Kind of copy and paste that sucker in, right? So this is just creating a plate. Once we have enough information, we'll then paint it to merge it together. Because you definitely don't want to leave it all copy and paste. If you do that, you'll have a terrible looking copy and paste painting, which is not what we want, right? That's not what directors want either, because it's very evident when you just copy and paste photos without painting on top or manipulating and getting all the colors and lighting to be in the same world. The light in this case is coming from the left, top left, and it's coming down. So you can see how often I use that perspective grid. Most of the time I'm using it for foreshortening. The foreshortening thing is so important because I run a school over here, and that's one of the I guess major mistakes I see students make. They might understand horizon lines and vanishing points, but foreshortening is something that a lot of people don't calculate. Which again is kind of like the lens factor, right? If you have a camera, play with your zoom, and you'll see that what the kind of lens factor. You shrink the lens or expand the lens, you'll see that objects go bigger or smaller inside it, and that needs to be calculated when you're dealing with a 2D painting like this. If you have the calculation incorrectly, for example, a car is 10 meters from you, but by opening the lens, you can actually make it look like it's much further from you, right? Similar in video games, if you increase the FOV, the field of view, from say 60 to 90. Objects feel like they're further from you, right? That's actually increasing the lens size. That's expanding it out. That's exactly what foreshortening is. So when you're drawing objects into a scene that has this kind of heavy foreshortening, you gotta make sure is the object at the right distance from the viewer. And the grid system helps us a lot. And that is not limited to just, again, to buildings and vehicles. Same thing if you draw on a creature's arm that has foreshortening. You have to make sure that you do that stuff correctly. So here you can see I'm manipulating the bus and the little fort that I built for them. Some photo scrap, and the rest of the stuff is all painted. to make our little human colony, and pretty soon we're gonna start the actual action scene, which this guy's gonna fire a giant laser lightning beam into it. Now we go back and touch some stuff up. At this point in the painting, mentally you're quite the stress level has been decreased dramatically because you have the major thing completed. At this point, you can turn it in, and if you want to call it done, it's probably good enough. The only thing you're missing is the laser, which is really easy to paint. But as a whole, it's kind of done. You can see that I drew a really quick read. You saw the triangle go up and down. Right? But in any case, the stress level is gone. So now it's just about having fun. At this point, you could probably start talking to your friends and listen to crazy music or whatever. It's hard to mess up. Okay, here I want to make a buddy to give a scale. In general, we like to do this kind of stuff because it gives you a depth of field kind of thing where when this guy's further from you, you could get a sense of space between this guy and the guy in the sky, right? Creating an illusion that this is taking place in a 3D environment, even though you're looking at a 2D painting, right? We're trying to trick the brain. But in this case, if you're going to use the same guy, which I did here, copy and paste it, you have to reverse the light. If I left the light the way it is, you see, then you have two suns in the sky, which doesn't make any sense. So we're gonna paint out all the highlights coming in from the, in this case, in the right now, and reverse it back to the left. Set a little detail that takes a little bit of time, but is important to do, because that would be a pretty major mistake, right? Little small mistakes here and there, who cares? No one's gonna notice. But these kind of things, they might not know what's wrong with it, but they feel like, how come that guy doesn't feel quite right? How come he's in the sky but he doesn't feel right? It's because you got the light source reversed, right? So. I deleted his legs. I want this guy's legs to be kind of folded, so it's kind of falling through the atmosphere here. So he's coming down to help his buddy, right? So, and this also gives the animators a little bit of movement, right? You put that there, the animators who's gonna say they're working on Weta and these kind of places, they're gonna look at this painting and go, okay, maybe when they're in the sky, they have their legs folded like a spider. When the spiders die, they kind of have that look, right? So, and then before they land, they expand it out and have this kind of soft, very animal graceful landing, right? So that's up to the animators to do. But you could give some hints to that. So mount that guy in. I keep that little guy on his own layer. I think I'll do that in a second here. So just in case the director is like, no, I don't want a second one, I just want one. You could delete them quite easily. Here we are going back, taking a break, right? That little guy took some time to paint, so go back to paint some grass, right? Mental breaks. This is all the kind of mental break. And this is the same thing as walking away from the painting and go drink some coffee for me, right? In this case, I'm doing a live demo, so I cannot walk away from the painting. But it's doing the same thing. It's quite relaxing, painting like holes and breaking windows and these kind of things. It's really easy. It's kind of brainless, so you kind of just let your brain go auto drive and think about something else, just to relax both your hand as well as your brain. Right. So whenever I do something trickier, you go back and do some of this. Right? Just debrief. These things are, again, just brainless stuff. Okay. Because after this, we're gonna paint the lightning beam. We're gonna get to another hard thing. It's not the hardest thing. It's probably the challenging thing. The UFO guys first. The human colony is second. The third one will be this kind of lightning storm that's about to happen. Here, the student, I'm trying to show students you can use a real photo if you want of a soldier. However, the density might be too high. And what that means is that especially if you build 3D models, you have to be careful of your density. Meaning that if I put a checkerboard on this little guy right now, I could texture him with a checkerboard. His checkerboard would be very, very tight compared to the bust that's next to him, because he's a photoreal guy, and so you can see his density is very, very high. So he stands out. He looks like a copy and paste job, right? You could try to hide it with some paint, which is what I did here. But another easy way to do is just paint it yourself. You got to make sure the density matches. Okay. So if you watch some other tutorials I have on YouTube, I actually talk about this point about texture density. It's one of those things that is a dead giveaway of a bad copy and paste job is when the density don't match. Essentially, it's basically two photographs taken at different distances, and you're shrinking one down or increasing the size of another one, and they no longer match. Right? Because one detail is too high and one detail is too low. So in the case of a photoreal soldier, his detail is way too high to be in this shot. If this is taken with a real camera, that camera will not be able to pick up that kind of level of fine detail. And even if it can, it's distracting. You don't want that in the photo. It pops out too much. So here I'm starting the lightning run. So even when you paint things like lightning, there's some kind of design element to it. You want to build up this kind of energy, right? So the majority of the beam is at his mouth area, and then they kind of expand out to hit the ground. So there's a energy, there's a kind of a feeling of build up towards toward the alien guy's mouth. And also I want to give this, even though it's lightning, it's all light, it should be in the same brightness. I want to give it some depth. So I'm actually painted some stuff out, deleted some other ones to give. So even though it's all white, it's not all the same value. And this is the first time I'm using a dodge brush. The dodge brush is dangerous brush because it oversaturates your stuff, but it's great for this kind of things, which are special effects. So I want this to literally light up like fire, right? That very hot fusion energy type of thing. And this brush, the dodge thing, is great for that. You can see it creates exactly the look we want, right? The Hollywood effect. Here I am, the same thing down here. So it's like it's so hot that it's burning the objects to pure white, right? The temperature is really, really hot. And we also use the same brush to do a little bit of bounce light. This is a light source. It's a primary light source. So it's going to create, for example, the shadow right there on this guy, as well as extracting some shadows from the soldiers running away from him, which you'll see here, right? Those are shadows that we paint back out. And also help create that sense of 3D space as well. And then this is a light source, so then that light is going to kind of hit everywhere here. And bounce around the scene. It's not going to hit the top of the bus, that's why I deleted it. I think that's too hot to be up there. So just the area around the actual impact point. Details, extract some stuff here and there. So this painting at this point is almost done. This is probably 90% there. Everything else is just fine detail. So if you have the time, for example, it's maybe this painting they want it by the end of the day, and it's only 1 o'clock in the afternoon. Then you have like 4 or 5 hours to work on it. So you could then go in and texture things, make it super detailed, right? But at least it's done. The major thing. So the stress is completely gone. Reversing the light a little bit further on this guy to make sure he looks like he's high in the atmosphere. And keep in mind, as things go away from you, saturation goes down because of atmosphere, so the guy in the far distance looks almost gray in color. Continue to paint some highlights, extract that in, make sure the composition is good in terms of lighting. These are all very minor stuff here at this point. Things that if you don't put in, it's not really going to kill your painting, but it's just going to make it feel a little bit tighter and more finished. So this thing's almost coming to a close. We still got about maybe about 3-4 minutes left here. But again, I hope you guys are enjoying this kind of tutorials. And for those who haven't seen this series before, again, you could go to YouTube and watch them, and they're all free. And just type in FZD School, and you can also get updates from my Twitter account, which whenever I upload a new image or a YouTube video, I'll go ahead and update that first. Here, we notice a perspective mistake. You can see the beam is going through and hitting the floor. However, this tower is actually in front of the building behind it, right? So you created a kind of Escher-ish illusion. So to make it work, we have to destroy the tower. You see that? Hope that makes sense. It's just a small minor mistake that got overlooked when I was painting this. I was like, oh, wait a second. Actually, a student noticed it and told me that I created a weird parallax illusion. So we got to destroy the tower, make the laser cut through that to make it make sense. So almost done at this point, adding some finer form details on the UFO guy, some dirt splashes here and there. Minor details here, some highlights, extracting out some. So this guy has a blue eyes or a kind of a cyan color here. So that's also a primary light source, so therefore it's going to affect the areas around it. And as we come to a close, I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and stay tuned for a lot more of these as well. So keep us informed as well. So if you have questions and those kind of such, you can ask on YouTube directly in the channels, and I usually try to get to them fairly quickly, and especially if you have a special request for a demo or something like that. So again, thanks for watching, and I will see you guys in the next tutorials. Okay, bye bye.